Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started. There are a few people still joining, but we will admit them as they join. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sylvia Alves. I am the Executive Director at the Algoma Workforce Investment Corporation, better known as AWIC. I'm delighted to be here today, joined by my colleague, Elena Ramirez, our Office Administrator. We're excited to partner with Nicki Straza from Straza Solutions, and I'll introduce Nicki a little bit more in detail shortly. As we kick off today's workshop, I want to highlight that one of our core projects this year focuses on supporting communities, especially the leaders, workers, and the future workforce, by helping them reframe generational differences as assets rather than obstacles in the workplace. So today we'll dive into underlying dynamics that often fuel misunderstanding and frustration. We'll explore practical tools to foster trust, psychological safety, and openness. So through the presentation today, we'll recognize the unique strengths and challenges each generation brings to the workplace. We'll understand how unconscious assumptions shape expectations and contribute to conflict. We'll learn strategies for creating safe spaces for dialogue. Sure, 1 second, my screen stopped sharing as usual. Technical difficulties. Get that back up again. All right. So by understanding and addressing, can everyone see that? One minute here. There we go. Thumbs up if everyone can see my slide. Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. So by understanding and addressing generational trends, organizations and individuals alike can cultivate cohesive, productive, and innovative workplaces where individuals are equipped with the skills to navigate the complexities of multi-generational teams. They can create environments that foster collaboration, inclusivity, and respect for diverse perspectives. In turn, this will boost engagement, enhance teamwork, and strengthen organizational culture while sparking innovation. Harnessing the unique strengths of each generation will not only pave the way for long-term organizational success, but also help us achieve our ultimate goal by improving our workforce attraction and retention. So in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands covered by the Robinson, Huron, and Robinson Superior treaties. We honor the Anishinaabe, Cree, Métis, and urban Indigenous people whose deep and enduring connection to this land has shaped generations of wisdom, culture, and teachings. We recognize the historical and ongoing impacts of colonization on Indigenous people and their communities. As we reflect on generational dynamics, we understand that each generation, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, bring unique teachings, perspectives, and experiences that shape our shared world. These generational teachings, passed down through centuries, often invaluable lessons on resilience, unity, and respect for the land, each other, and the future. At AWIC, we are committed to supporting workforce development initiatives that honor these teachings and the contributions of Indigenous people. By recognizing and celebrating the strengths of each generation, we can create a workplace environment where diverse perspectives are not just valued, but celebrated. As we move forward with our work together, let's approach each interaction with deep respect for the lessons each generation has to offer. Through continuous learning, collaboration, and open, respectful dialogue, we aim to build a workforce where empowerment, inclusion, and understanding guide our collective progress. Miigwech, and thank you. For those that don't know AWIC or unfamiliar, the Algoma Workforce Investment Corporation is a nonprofit, community-driven organization and a proud member of Ontario's workforce planning boards. Our mission is to support workforce development initiatives tailored to the needs of Algoma, and we help communities navigate and address the ever-evolving labor market challenges and opportunities they face. We do this through our labor market research and insights. So through data analysis, we analyze local labor market trends for the region, for Algoma, or specific communities. We identify skills gaps and forecast emerging employment needs. This data-driven approach provides businesses, job seekers, and educational institutes with the insights needed to make informed workforce decisions. Through workforce development and collaboration, we foster workforce development and collaboration with employers and training providers and community organizations. So through these partnerships, we ensure that workforce initiatives are aligned with the local industry needs and help address skill shortages. Acting as a resource to employers and job seekers. So we engage with employers and business owners to understand their workforce needs and their requirements, providing them with resources to adapt to changing workforce dynamics and strengthening their retention and recruitment strategies. Additionally, we offer job seekers career resources, skills development tools, and data to career pathways to employment or education in high demand sectors. All of this is made possible through the funding support with the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development. So a few housekeeping sessions before I pass this on to Nicki. So this workshop will run for 2 hours. We encourage you to participate, ask questions through the chat as they arise. Nicki will address questions at the end of her presentation. This workshop is being recorded, so the presentation and any additional resources will be sent to you in a follow-up email and also be posted on our website as a resource. You're welcome to put yourself on camera. We do have everyone muted just to minimize background noise as Nicki goes through her presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, we'd be grateful if you could take a few moments to complete our survey that will pop up. So your feedback always helps us improve for future workshops that we host. And with that, I'll introduce Nicki. So today we're joined with Nicki Straza from Straza Solutions. So Nicki is a respected workplace culture strategist, speaker, and certified flourishing coach with more than 25 years of leadership and organizational development experience across nonprofit, corporations, and small business sectors. As a founder of Straza Solutions, Nicki partners with organizations to foster inclusive, trust-based workplaces where every generation can thrive. So we look forward to a great workshop, and I'm looking forward to learning alongside of everyone today.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I appreciate the generous introduction and setting the stage for our conversation today. I would love to invite anyone who wants to throw on their camera and show their beautiful faces. Be free to do so. I always love seeing your faces and getting that feedback as well. So thank you. I'm just excited to be here. I got passionate about this work as I myself was a young leader and recognized the dynamics that happen as I was, stretching my leadership wings as a young person. And, I think every generation for all of time has run into those generational bumps, older perspectives, maybe dismissing or not taking younger perspectives seriously, and younger perspectives full of ideas and energy and enthusiasm, and bumping up against the way we've always done it. And that tale is as old as time memorial. It's as old as humanity itself. So why are we talking about that now? And that is one of the things that I'm hoping to kind of champion today because the workforce has changed, the workplace has changed, and generational dynamics are playing a different role that we haven't seen in years gone past. And imagine this, that, even 150 years ago, grandparent, parent, child likely had similar roles, similar jobs, and the job itself didn't shift too profoundly from one generation to the other. Small advances in the way we did things, in methodology, in new tools, in new, resources, but that wasn't a major factor in work life. We skip ahead to 2025, and not only is technology changing things on the daily, but the gaps and the experience that technology and business and the world we live in, how it shapes us as we grow, differs drastically from generation to generation, to the point now where things are speeding along so fast that the typical generation, which used to be anywhere between 15 and 25 years, is now shrinking to be 10 to 15 years. And there's even micro changes within those generations. So we're already seeing that with the millennials. There's the older millennials and the younger millennials, and very different, experiences depending on your age, just within that cohort. And we're seeing that again with Gen Z, especially with COVID impacting those older Gen Zs. And then our younger Gen Zs are coming on the other side of resilience. So it's always an interesting factor. So I'm hoping to paint a little bit of a picture, give us some insights and nuggets that we can lean in on. And then if you are in the Algoma area, in early November, there are some in-person workshops that we're going to be doing to lean more into these skills. And so Sylvia will gladly share that information as well. So I'm going to just jump in and share my screen. And you can give me a thumbs up if you can see it just fine. And there we go. Can everyone see that adventure? No trouble? Yes? Awesome. Okay. So we are leaning into a little, like I said, I set the stage, things are changing. The nature of work is changing. The nature of choice is changing. The workforce is changing. The workplace is changing. So many things going on. And so then we look into some real current state trends. And I'm so grateful for, the work that AWIC and different organizations in workforce planning do, because it helps us to understand regionally and globally the workforce trends that are impacting us. And so first of all, we're in a season where we may have up to 5 different generations all working in the workplace at the same time. So anyone from our silent generation, so they would be our elders, our seniors, those in their 80s and 90s. Some of them are still working and bringing their brilliance to the table. And then we have our boomers, we have our Gen Xers, we have our millennials, and we have our Gen Z. 5 different generations spanning probably 100 years worth of experience, change, and experience. Technology, of course, is changing the way we do work. It's changing how the world works. It's changing how we communicate. It's changing how we interact with each other, and doing so at record speeds. I am a Gen Xer. I know a world where the internet did not exist. And here we are, not only grappling with the internet, but now with AI. And so in just a handful of years, and I mean, I'm a little old, but I'm not too old yet. In the next 8 to 10 years, 25% of our workforce is expected to retire. And I just want you to grapple with that statistic alone. Our boomers have lingered in the workplace. Our Gen Xers are not really going to stay in the workplace unless they have to financially, which that impacts many. But all of them are coming of age or are well past retirement age. Our youngest Gen Xers are turning 60 this year. So some of them are already starting to retire. With that mass exodus of retirement is going a wealth of organizational knowledge, expertise, craft knowledge, and leadership. Boomers are a huge generation. They fill a ton of leadership roles. There straight up are simply not enough Gen X individuals to take the place of the exiting boomer roles in leadership. And so we are needing and depending on our millennials to step up and take up leadership roles where they may not have done so at the age they would need to and are being asked to now. And not every generation and not every organization has done a really good job of developing a leadership pipeline so that those younger generations are ready to take on the massive responsibilities of leadership. So we have this at play. In addition to that, our immigration is slowing down, our birth rates are slowing down, and so global trends are pointing to up to a 30% reduction in workforce size. So new people coming into the workforce is 30% less than in previous years. And that simply means we have less people coming into the workforce to do the work. So we have 60% exiting our workforce. That is stressing. And it is stressing for a lot of leaders. And then those leaders that we can get in, they see things differently, they function differently, they have different values, and keeping them now becomes a real challenge. AI is having a significant impact on entry-level jobs. And so those entry-level jobs that our young people are depending on to gain work experience, to make the shift from school to work. I mean, school and work do not function the same way. And oftentimes, young people do not know how work works. They only know how school works. And school means you do your best and you get pushed on along as you can. And that isn't the way the world works in work. And we don't do a good job of preparing our young people for work. And then on top of that, it's becoming more complex to get hired as a young person and to find accessible work that we can learn and develop our chops on. Last but not least, we have some real economic and political uncertainty that is happening in the world. And, those are all things beyond our control. And that happens in ebbs and flows. And it impacts worker stress, job loss, financial stability, and all of those kind of things. So even though it's not necessarily a direct correlation to the things that we are doing, it is rolling around in the back of everyone's head and putting people a little bit more on edge and creating opportunity for us to be divided on things. And so there are a lot of things going on in the world. And I would love to engage you. You can, share in the chat. I would love for a chatty group to throw in some thoughts. When you look and you think about the workplace challenges in your world, what dynamics do you see coming out with when we talk about our, Gen Xers and boomers retiring and our young people coming in and the size of the workforce shrinking? What does that tell you? What dynamics? And I would love to hear in the comments if you would throw in a few comments in the chat about what you see coming down the pike, what challenges may be coming as a result. Some challenges for sure that clients that I've been working with, they have cited the challenge of a leadership gap, for example. So because there is less people coming in as prepared as maybe they did in previous generations, and older generations have held on to leadership titles and opportunities for longer, the opportunity to develop new leadership has not always been prioritized. When you refer to we are not doing a good enough job of preparing young people, who is the we? It is the universal we, not the you or the me. There are going to be many people in this room who are targeting and working on that. As a generalization, that we aren't doing a good job of preparing young people for the workforce. I love it when I meet organizations who have that commitment because it's truly remarkable and it's really incredible. Different perceptions of work ethic and what that means. Oh my goodness, that is such a generational dynamic that's at play. Well said. Agree with leadership gaps, also values and differences in expectations. Expectations and flexibility, absolutely. The main challenge for me is a huge gap is transferring the experience and skills from older generations to newer generations. I really love that one. And the challenge with that one is how our older generations were taught is not how our younger generations learn. And that translation, because we taught how we were taught. And that becomes a challenge as we look to pass on that knowledge. I really love that insight. Thank you. The heavy reliance on AI from Gen Z and the lack of guidelines, policies for use of AI in the workplace is a huge gap. You have hit a big button. Workplaces are not as far ahead on high tech and AI as our young people coming in are used to using. And so now what do we do with that tension? Now we're inviting our younger people to step back into email, to step back into Slack even, and different ways of doing things that to them maybe feel archaic and old. To us are, well, we just put that in 10 or 15 years ago. And you're right, it creates all these tensions. What an incredible list already of things that we can see creating dynamics within the workplace. Differences in resilience, in-person interactions, not mediated by technology. You are 100% right. So that shift from face-to-face real-time dialogue to asynchronous communication. So asynchronous means, it's not happening at the same time. So email would be an example of asynchronous communication, texting. I send my email, send my text. You get your text and email whenever you get it, and you reply when you get the opportunity. And now there's a gap between our communication. That's wonderful because it helps you create some really thoughtful responses, hopefully. And it also puts a lot of pressure on those real-time conversations, doesn't it? Communication channels are all over the place. Oh my goodness. Yes. Who recognizes? I have 3 emails I have to keep track of. I have a messenger board. I have Microsoft chat. I have all the things. Like, where was that communication that I'm looking for in the first place? And when I find it, oh yeah, that is so real. So many good insights. Thank you so much for sharing. So we can see as we look at these different dynamics in the current state, how complex navigating human getting along is. And we've only just talked about generational differences, not socioeconomical difference, not cultural difference, not language difference, not any of those other differences that also apply in our workplaces. So we have different challenges that we see in the workplace when it comes, and we've kind of hit on so many of these in your feedback. According to research done by Megan Gearhart in the States, only 8% of organizations actually consider generational diversity a category of diversity that should be thought about. Because age diversity has been with us since the dawn of time, we don't think about it. We don't notice when our bias shows up because it's just how it's always been. It's how we were treated. It's just what you do when you're old. You're biased against the young, or it's just what you do when you're young. You're biased against the old. And there's, it's sad and it's normalized, and we can do better. And that's why all of you are here, because you know that we can and we want to do better. So a few little distinctions about our generation. Now, these differences are, again, globalized universal statements. They are not true of every single person in the generational cohort. They are generalizations of an experience that a generational cohort has had over a course of time. And even generational cohorts are arbitrary. So, people are like, well, what generation is what? Well, there's not even really like an authority on that, because a generational cohort is largely shaped by two key things. There is geography, so where we are in the world, and the events that occurred for us in that geography. And those big events are the things that shape our formative years. And they shape under a generational cohort. So for example, the Twin Towers going down on 9/11 was a substantial, life-changing, like so many things changed as a result of that world event, right? And that marked the millennial generation, right? Most of us who, are older remember that where we were standing when that news broke. And so that shaped a generation. It shaped the way people responded as mass groups. COVID is going to be a major factor for Gen Z. So these rulings are kind of arbitrary, and they are not guaranteed. So we have people who are between generations. So, they're right on the bubble. They're, the boomers, for example, go from 1946 to 1964. And then our Gen Xers go from 1965 to 1978, 1980, depending. Well, those kids who are born in those years where those changes are happening often embody, experiences from both generations, right? So then they don't feel like they belong. So all of this is a little bit messy on a good day, but we're going to lean onto our generalizations, if only to give context, and then we're going to lean into the humanity of navigating all of these perspectives. Is that fair? So a little quick highlight, our boomers are master adapters. 1946 to 1965, they were coming out of the post-World War II. They were recovering from the Great Depression. They were recovering from all of these pieces. Their parents were the ones who endured so much of their Great Depression, and so very much shaped a lot of how our boomers grew up. Boomers know life before color TV, right? Imagine that. They know life before. They know when TV was a thing in the living room we all gathered around as a special event. It's a cool world. They understand and have a real passion for volunteering, community service, donating, and they have a real community and collective approach in a lot of ways, except for maybe business. Although many boomers got into business to help the community. So many boomers are very loyal to their company. Okay, so they are coming out of the Great Depression, all these different things. Business and economy is starting to boom. And if someone gave you a job, you were the luckiest person on the block. And therefore you gave them everything they asked for and a little more to demonstrate loyalty to them, and you did not leave for 40 years. That was the world they lived in. They were loyal to a company to a fault. And those companies used and abused in some cases. There were some companies that did a really great job at taking care of their people. A wide swath of workplace experience. Now our Gen Xers, the forgotten generation, give me a little thumbs up if you're a Gen Xer. I want to see you. There's so many, right? We have our Gen Xers, and our Gen Xers are the latchkey kids. They are the ones who were the first generation to experience both parents at work, and both parents went to work, but daycare hadn't been normalized yet. So here we are in the latchkey kids coming home from school, doing their own thing until mom and dad get home from work. As the older or the younger Gen Xers come along, daycare comes along, and so they aren't so much the latchkey kids anymore. Gen X knows life before the internet. I kind of referenced that earlier. We know life before the internet. We were the ones playing outside in the yard till dawn or till dark, not till dawn. That would get us in trouble. We had to be home by dark. We had free range of the neighborhood, and we had a very different childhood experience for most kids in the last two generations. We're digital pioneers. So digital, the internet opened up an entirely different world. Our Steve Jobs are, all innovators in tech. So the tech that we're very comfortable using was innovated and developed by our Gen X pioneers as they were learning the technology. Gen X differs in their loyalty because they were not so loyal to the company. They saw through and had a bit of a cynicism towards command and control style of leadership. They wanted a bit more work-life balance. They were not okay being treated like slaves. And so when they found a leader that they really loved, they would follow that leader in some cases from company to company. Okay, so that loyalty made a shift. And Gen X was also kind of known for being independent, a little bit cynical, and skeptical of authority. So already we kind of see that generational shift. Smaller generation compared to the boomers. Boomers had 78 plus million people in their cohort, whereas Gen Xers were less than 50 million, in North America. And so now we come to our millennials. Millennials, again, another huge cohort, bigger than the boomers. And they had opinions. And I loved it because they were innovative, they were optimistic, they were positive. The world was their oyster. They are, unlike the boomers, who are very competitive overall, millennials are very collaborative. They learned very quickly to share and to collaborate and to work together. Millennials know life before social media. So the internet was there, but social media didn't really kind of come out until they were in their adult years. And so they know how to have a teenage years where your life history isn't recorded on social media. Different world. Their loyalty shifted as well because they recognized that companies and capitalism, was taking a little bit of a greedy turn. They had seen their fair share of leaders with scandals and disruption and disappointment. And millennials were inspired by purpose and cause. They wanted to see the world be a greener place, see the world be a better place, reduce poverty, very, very cause and purpose driven. And as a result, they were very driven to work and spend their energy and their optimism and their positivity to make the world a better place. And it's fantastic. They're also a generation that faced some real substantial pressures. The millennial generation is the first generation that wasn't doing better than their parents. They're getting the pressures. For boomers, university was very affordable and very accessible. But for millennials, that changed. And instead of going into the workforce with a new degree and no debt, they went in burdened with some serious debt that they now were desperate for a job to pay back. Now we shift to our Gen Zs, our youngest generation now entering the workforce. They're just starting. The youngest ones are just in high school now, grade 9. Our youngest Gen Zs are alphas who are hot on the heels of Gen Z. The oldest ones are in grade 7 and 8 right now. And our Gen Z are our digital creators. They know life only before AI, right? So AI is their new thing. They have lived their lives on screen. They have lived their lives interacting and having normal interactions with screens, technology, and interactive media. They are loyal, and their loyalty has shifted too. And it shifted actually in two ways. It shifted to causes, not just purpose, but causes. So they want to see justice. They want to see equity. They want to see care for the earth. They are social justice advocates. Social media came out in their adolescent years and had a substantial impact on their mental and emotional well-being that only 10 to 15 years later are we starting to see and understand. Because, well, millennials and Gen X parents like me, we were enthralled by that new technology. We didn't realize how it would change our brains, how it would change our world. But these kids lived it. They lived the impact. They lived the cyberbullying. They lived the emotional manipulation of social media. They lived their lives being vulnerable 24/7. They lived not being able to escape their bully because their bully followed them on their phone all the way home. They had a different experience again. And their adolescence in social media had a significant impact on their workplace readiness. And that impacted their ability to navigate. So they are huge advocates for work-life balance and mental and well-being in the workplace. And rightly so, right? Unfortunately, a lot of us older generations were just never given that space. And we didn't know better. We didn't know we could ask for help or support. And it is what it is. There's no blame to be placed. It's just the way it is. And then we notice they've been impacted by mental health. And then on top of that complexity, we add COVID. And COVID impacted every one of us. Like there's not a single one of us that didn't impact. However, depending on your generation, it will have impacted you differently. For our Gen Zs, for our older Gen Zs primarily, it took away their high school and their college experiences, work placements, co-ops, and setting them back yet again in workplace readiness. And I know we get frustrated. I mean, I've got Gen Z kids. I get it. And it's easy to compare them coming into the workplace with ourselves going into the workplace, even our millennials going into the workplace. But they've been handed a different bucket, and that has impacted them. And when we forget that as older generations, we run the risk of actually losing their trust and losing their engagement because they are a generation who really values connection. This generation, like if technology has pushed boomers and X's and millennials to be in their phone, yes, our young people are on their phone, but they actually value face-to-face connection, which a lot of people don't believe about our Gen Zs. And so it's really, really fascinating when you actually think about all these different dynamics at play, different values, different perspectives on work, different needs. We understand how it feels, and it can be aggravated in the work dynamic. And so in my work, working with organizations, I see 5 kind of real key areas of conflict. And I would love for you in the chat to, comment on which 1, 2, or 3 of these is a challenge for you, where you recognize this in your workspace. So differences in emotional intelligence, okay? So each generation has strengths along the spectrum of emotional intelligence skills, and they put a different value on different skills as they're going through. And this is often the biggest source of conflict because one of our vulnerabilities in every generation is that we think we are right. It's called chronocentrism. It's a bias that we have that our age, our formation, our generation, we were the enlightened ones. We got it figured out. those who came before are fuddy-duddies, and those who come after are, you know, whatever names we want to put on it. Subconsciously, we think we're right. And then when everyone in the room thinks they're right, we have some trouble. Our older generations needed stoicism and being able to navigate their emotions, and they kept them very close to their heart and didn't often wear them on their sleeve, and that was safety for them. That stoicism was taught to them by their silent parents who endured some of the worst hardship through the Great Depression. It was survival and vulnerability and being transparent and authentic. You just didn't do, or you lost your job. We come full spectrum now as we come, and we've become a little more individualistic in our culture. And as time has gone, we've taken more stock in well-being and different stock. And we've come along to, we have Gen Z who struggles with some of those more stoic responses, but listens and cares and empathizes better than any other generation. Which one of them is right? Yes, they're both right. It's a spectrum of skills, and that is why we need each other. Because we don't have all the emotional intelligence skills. We need them. We need each other to sharpen those within ourselves and to challenge our task before people mantra that's been handed down to us for a few generations. So that leads me to the hierarchy versus matrix styles of leadership. When the economic and the industrial revolution very much came out, we were working on creating structures and hierarchies because our education system was pumping out factory workers, and we needed them to behave and comply and do all the things right so that every car that came off that Ford plant was shiny and exactly the same. Well, we have moved from the industrial revolution into products, into knowledge, mobilization, and our work keeps shifting. I mean, most of us do, there are a percentage of us who still do work with our hands, and there's a growing percentage of us who do a lot of work with our brains on the computer, creating content, doing writing and whatever, math, whatever, architecture. The hierarchy hasn't always been, it was necessary. And as work has changed, we find it's maybe no longer serving the work as well as it used to. And younger generations really love flat org charts, shared responsibility, collaboration, everyone having a voice. And if you grew up in a hierarchy where there's a big boss and he's the boss or she's the boss, and that's just how it is, that's hard to compute. And so again, we're grappling with these, what has always been normal for us is not normal for our young people. And then we have definitions of words. And I already saw that coming up in the chat. We had work ethic and a few different things. Words like respect, work ethic, vulnerability, professionalism at work, psychological safety have different meanings to different generations. We say all the same words, we mean very different things. So for example, I'll just use respect, which I use often. If I say respect, well, let's have fun. When I say respect, what does that mean? Throw it in the chat. Let's see what we have. Let's see what comes up here in the chat. How does respect behave? Throw it in the chat. I would love your thoughts on it. Workplace readiness in terms of showing up on time. Yes, so that's another one of those definition of words. Value of work varies with monetary reward. Yes, I absolutely love that. So nobody's jumping in on commenting about respect. That is fun. I love that. Respond with empathy, listening to a diversity of opinions, professional, considerate attitude. Love it. Yes. Keep going. Got a few. Everybody's thinking. Plain and simple, we have different perspectives and different interpretations of what work means and what respect means. Fair treatment, active listening, honesty, even when it's difficult. So there is a great example, honesty, even when it's difficult. Older generations would never have allowed that. I don't care what your opinion is. This is how it is. Oh, maybe that's not true. Honesty went one way, down, right? Respect, listening, responding with empathy. So our older generations have a more command and control upbringing. Oftentimes respect behaves like compliance, behaves like do your job, behaves like yes sir, no sir, and your title sir or ma'am. um, and even respect is Mr. and Mrs. or sir and ma'am. Younger generations don't use those titles. They don't use those labels, right? Respect to them has a lot to do with personal accountability, mutuality, empathy, authenticity, being seen and valued for who you are as you are, not performing to some magic standard. Who's wrong? Who's right? And this is the challenge that rubs us every time because yes, you are all right. There are aspects of those things. There are moments when those responses are correct, and there are moments when we get biased and stuck. And so we have these real challenges. Communication preferences, those kind of came up already in your thoughts as we were coming along. We've had shifts from face-to-face to email to app-based communications like Slack and Messenger. And now we're figuring out what virtual looks like. And we still want to do face-to-face. And there's 20 different channels of communication. And where on earth was that message, right? And the biggest shift being from synchronous to asynchronous communication, which is a brand new concept in the last 30 years. So for our boomers and our Gen Xers, we had to learn to talk on the phone. That was just how you did life. But millennials and Gen Z have had an option for asynchronous communication and email and different factors, which has changed the skill sets they practice as they're growing up. And then we have workplace readiness, and I love that that was already shown and shared in here. Young people are not arriving in the workplace as prepared as they have seemed in the past. And for Gen Z, there's those two factors that I really highlighted, the impact of social media on their mental well-being and COVID really complicating their lives. But millennials had a different degree as well because they went to school for a lot longer. Many of them went to college and university, whereas their Gen Xer or boomers parents may or may not have, right? And they incurred a lot of debt, right? So that forced them to, take any job that they could to make ends meet in that push for independence. So changes in education, COVID, social media, focuses on mental and emotional well-being, lots of impacts on workplace readiness. And we've done a lot of good in these areas as well. I mean, we have more programs now, inviting kids into the trades and getting them apprenticeships and all of those types of things. And education is becoming more and more inaccessible unless you're wealthy. Right? And so there's lots of these different dynamics. Respect the different levels of skills and perspective. Absolutely love that. Respect can exist in both capacities, but ultimately both need to align with workplace values. I really love that insight. And that is why recruitment becomes so important because we are looking for those people who share those values, right? And we can't force people to have values that are different from our own or different, we need that alignment. And that's harder and harder to find in times. So we have lots of areas of conflict. Who here has already in our first hour learned something new or have found something valuable, give me a thumbs up if there's some things there that you have found useful in your awareness and your growing. Absolutely. Wonderful. So I would love for you to throw in the chat to give that some articulation. What has been most useful? What has helped to shift your perspective on maybe something you hadn't thought of before or a nugget you hadn't considered? I would love if you wouldn't if you'd throw that in the chat and just share that insight with others, because maybe your language will even deepen the insight and the learning, because I'm a firm believer the genius is in the room, and we've already demonstrated that from all of these posts and comments already. So if there's something that's jumped out at you, I'd love for you to throw that in the chat as we continue on what has been most useful so far. So I want to shift in our next kind of segment to kind of look at what are our key skills for navigating these complex generational dynamics. And the strengths and skills of each generation are needed and valuable. I really love that. So well said. Thank you. Here's the challenge. Not only do we have generational dynamics to navigate at work, we have so many dynamics. We have rural versus urban dynamics. We have age dynamics. We have social economical differences and dynamics. We have, we have gender dynamics. We have cultural and language dynamics. There are so many dynamics at play, but what I've loved about generational dynamics is it helps us to see there, because we are all familiar with generational dynamics, we are all have experienced them no matter who we are. It makes for a good wedge in the door to cultural conversations. And it makes, because everyone can recognize these with a little bit of thought, and then it gives us those tools that we can go, oh, if I can start with this one, the same skills that I apply to navigating these skills, I can now apply to these other diversities that I have to navigate, and they will help me there too. And I find that so very, very powerful. Virginia threw in there, highlighting that different words mean different things to each generation. I hope we learn how to bridge this gap. I love that heart. Yes, I love that. Thank you. So I see 4 key skills when it comes to navigating generational and straight up cultural dynamics at work. So all those diversities at play. The first is coaching skills. This is our ability to transfer knowledge as well as empower others to learn, discover, think, explore, create. And coaching skills, I think, hands down, is the #1 skills our millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers need. And to be honest, I would give it to my Gen Zs too, because they don't always share their brilliance in an honorable way either. They have lots of great things. So I think coaching skills across the board would really, really help us share ideas and our thoughts in a meaningful and a respectful way to each other. The second is psychological safety. Who here can recognize psychological safety as a relatively new term for them, and that you maybe grew up the first 30 years of your life never once hearing the term psychological safety? And I remember for my own self, I remember the first time I heard the term psychological safety, and I'm peeling back the curtain here because I teach this now. The first time I heard the term psychological safety, my gut reaction was so Gen X. Who needs they're just being soft. They're just being you got to have some grit. Okay. So full disclosure, that was my first initial response to the idea of introducing psychological safety. Well, you guys are all just going soft. You need some more grit. Suck it up, buttercup. Let's go. The mantra of Gen X and maybe boomers. But true psychological safety is an environment that enables every generation to have a voice. And the key is to understand that each generation needs different things to feel safe. So gone are the days when a one-size-fits-all program or ruling or policy works. We just have too much diversity in the workplace now for those one-size-fits-all solutions. We have to find our way of finding that adaptability and that flexibility and that where we can create autonomy and customization within our infrastructure to support individuals. And psychological safety is this space where we honor the fact that other people see things differently. And rather than pushing for what we believe is right, we step back and believe that the right will emerge as we come together and listen to each other. And that takes time and that takes trust. And that is all the things that most of us don't want to spend our work hours doing, but is actually the thing that shapes culture, makes work a place we want to be, makes retention and engagement go through the roof in our organizations. And it's the important but not urgent work of leadership. Then we have mutual mentoring, and I include mutual mentoring, and it's different from coaching. Mutual mentoring is this idea that it's very skill focused, right? So coaching is a broader kind of how we get along. It's our personality, it's our emotions, those kind of things. But mutual mentoring is really around the practical skills. And the truth of the matter is, unlike 100 years ago, where the adults in the room were the most brilliant in the room and the knowledge was passed down, our younger generations are bringing an entire level of expertise to the workplace that we just didn't have the luxury of getting as older generations. And so it really behooves us to create space for mutual learning, for us to learn from each other and create those relationships that are built across generations for both sides to learn from each other and to feel valued in that contribution. And so I find that a very, very valuable strategy. And then conflict resolution skills, hands down, probably we've needed this one in leadership for all of time, in all fairness, but skills in conflict resolution that preserve the dignity of the individuals and preserve the humanity of the individuals in the dynamic and the interaction is the goal. Conflict resolution often slides down to being about getting the job done or about compliance or following the rules. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. None of us are having any successful businesses if we're not getting things done. And if we are able to humanize the person that we are having a conflict with and get to a place where instead of it being you against me over the problem, it becomes you and me solving the problem, and recognizing that the challenges that we're experiencing and the conflicts and the problems that we're trying to address aren't the people, but the skills, the understanding, the other kind of pieces that are there. And if we can get on the same side of solving that together, reducing the shame and the blame and the accusation and the pointed fingers and the labeling and the name calling, we actually would get to a place where people are empowered and feel heard and seen and safe and can bring their best work to what they do. And this is the hard work of leadership. This is the stuff that we really should be investing our time and money in, and also the stuff we push off and never have a room on our budget for. And then we wonder why we struggle. It's actually really interesting because there is substantial amount of evidence now that organizations who invest in workplace well-being for their team and cultural health receive a $2 to $7 return on investment for every dollar they invest in that work. And the truth of the matter is, your culture is going to impact your bottom line faster than any other infrastructure component in your business. Relationships are the lubrication of the work that we do. We are strong when our people are strong. And we are healthy when our people are healthy. Our business thrives when our people thrive. And we all have different opinions about what thriving looks like. And that's how we have to come together and explore. So I'm going to jump in, give a little bit more insight on each of these. I want you to start thinking about what questions you have, because I know you're going to have lots, and I'll bet a lot of them are rooted in, yeah, but this, and you know what? I get it. So I'll do my best, but start thinking about what those questions are and start throwing those in the chat so that Sylvia and Elena can grab those and have those handy for us at the end. So leaning into coaching skills, and there's three kind of key pieces. Sir John Whitmore says coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance, and it is helping them learn rather than teaching them. So the whole, give a man a fish, teach a man to fish is the coaching paradigm, right? We want to teach people to fish, but more than teach them, we want them to help them understand how they learn and to be ongoing learners. So we're going to take that one step further. So there are three key coaching skills that I would like to highlight today. First, it's the shift from advising to inquiry. Oftentimes I'm working with people and they position themselves as the answer person. Yeah, well, I had so-and-so come up, and so then I gave them this answer, and then this person comes up and they don't know what to do, and so I told them to do that, and blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, I mean, it's expedient in that they're going off and assuming they understood us correctly, going off and doing the thing we told them. But we haven't actually nurtured their ability to problem solve that again. So we've created a dependency as a leader that the next time that comes, if there's slight nuance in that circumstance, they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to ask you again, right? We want to nurture critical thinking. We want to teach them how to explore, problem solve, learn. What have you tried already? What outcome were you hoping for? What worked? What didn't work? What could we do differently next time? This encourages critical thinking. It's empowering. So it encourages that self-efficacy and that ability for them to navigate themselves. And if we partner that psychological safety with that, where when they make a mistake, they aren't punished for it, but instead we turn it into a learning experience and we debrief it through coaching, that becomes a powerful tool for learning and growth. It also builds long-term capability and capacity rather than short-term compliance, right? And any of you who have been a parent recognize that sometimes you also need short-term compliance. I just need you to stop. And that's real too, okay? The second coaching skill is schedule consistent coaching touch points. Who here is still familiar with the annual performance review instated by our boomers, right? Very effective before. And I actually had a conversation with a Gen Z colleague, well, friend of one of my kids. And he was absolutely devastated because he got let go from an architectural firm that he was working at for 3 years. And I was just helping him process his experience. And he said to me, I don't understand it. He said, when I was learning the job, there was this one process that didn't make sense to me. And I questioned it. And they told me that I didn't know what I was talking about and that I should just follow the rules. So I did. And then after 3 years of doing this, that was the thing he was let go for because he followed this old process. And he was so hurt and he was so frustrated because he was like, I could have changed that 2.5 years ago if I'd have known I was supposed to do something different. But there was a breakdown in communication. One boss had one expectation, one boss had another. And this boss said, stay the same, and this boss let him go because he did. And it gets to be complicated. If we normalize a check-in, hey, what's working? What's not working? What are you learning? How's it going? What support do you need? And we normalize that 5, 10 minutes, even once a day, just checking in, seeing how people are doing. I mean, every person needs different degrees of frequency, but can we lean in and allow that individual to articulate the frequency that would be supportive to them? Because too much frequency can also be micromanagey, right? So how do we have a conversation with our individuals, say, hey, I believe that you're capable of doing this job. What does support look like for me? When should I check in, circle in, whatever, and set that frequency, and then normalize that coaching. So, hey, I observed this and this happened. Talk me through your process on that. Or how did you come to that conclusion? I think I'm missing something. And allowing them to unpack it. And last but not least, we want to model a growth mindset. So often, and again, this is kind of handed down to us from other generations, and it's not necessarily bad. I mean, I understand where it was born out of professionalism, out of a desire to do excellent work. But there was this old kind of narrative that you had to do your work perfectly and that you weren't vulnerable. You didn't share your mistakes. But we have learned through psychology and neuroscience that that isn't actually how humans thrive. It was what was necessary and maybe how we did it then, but it is, as we evolve, we learn better, we do better. And a growth mindset is that idea that I am also learning, I am growing, I am becoming. And we have these opportunities to lean in and share where we messed it up. And depending on what generation you come from, that is either par normal or absolutely terrifying. And that's real. Again, another dynamic that we now have to navigate as leaders. But here's the thing. When we are also the learners as leaders, we give permission for others to learn openly. We give opportunity for transparency. We as leaders become more aware of what's actually happening within our team because we are creating transparency and authenticity, and we're able to influence and steer and coach and navigate and help our people through those things. Whereas if we don't have psychological safety and we don't have a growth mindset, if we're kind of, this is how it has to be, it suppresses all of that concern, and it also suppresses all of that innovation. And so a growth mindset, when we model it, it tells our people that they also can be curious, can make mistakes, and can learn and grow. So, coaching skills. Next, we have our psychological safety. And this, again, is a practice that is really hard to nurture. And the longer you've been in the workplace, the more often we are stuck in our way of doing things because it has worked up till now. And that's awesome. And maybe we haven't looked to see how well it has worked. And we can consider that. So 3 keys for psychological safety. And Amy C. Edmondson, who is probably one of the experts on this matter, says psychological safety is not about being nice or lowering performance standards. It's about giving real candid feedback, openly admitting mistakes, and learning from them. So 3 keys for psychological safety. We want to reward candor, not just compliant. So we want to, so for those who raise the tough questions in our discussions, or name an uncomfortable truth, or point out a flaw in our plan, we want to give them kudos, not punishment, or not shame, or not criticism. We want to give them kudos. Ah, I didn't see that. Notice that. Thank you. That was valuable. Okay, how does that change how we're thinking about the situation? Okay. We want to turn speaking up into a recognized leadership behavior, not a career risk. Right? Now, there are ways to speak up that demonstrate respect. And I am a big believer that we need to be able to create a culture that defines what respect behaves like in our organization so that when we speak up, we can do it with candor, not crassness. Is that fair? We want to lead with curiosity before judgment. In moments of tensions, when things aren't going well, instead of just coming in with the hammer or, why can't you do things right? Or who knows what, I mean, I've used all of those sentences myself. Could we start with, tell me more about what led you to this conclusion or this perspective? Walk me through your process. You came to a different place than I did. I think I might be missing something. Walk me through your process. And then you learn how they're thinking. You get them to tell you where they're going. And then you can ask those coaching questions about what worked, what didn't work, what could we do differently, what are the implications of, etc. And the last one is closing the feedback loop. When someone shares input, circle back and explain how you took that into consideration. You can probably give me a thumbs up about how annoying it is to fill out a survey at a grocery store or all the things and never actually know if your input did anything meaningful at the end. Right? Yeah, right? So annoying. And when we put in the something in the suggestion box, it sucks to feel like it just went into the nether and or the trash can because we have no idea if anybody heard it, seen it, cared about it. And one of the biggest ways that we can create psychological safety is to be able to say, I heard you say this. I took some time to think about it. I reviewed this, whatever actions you took. And this is where I've landed. Can we talk about whether or not this meets the need, solves the problem, addresses the concern, We're closing the loop, the circle back. One of the clients that I work with is an OHT. And they have normalized within the Ontario Health Team the voice of lived experience in the processes of the changes that they're making in healthcare. And what's been fascinating is as people with lived experience using that particular service have insight on how things could be better, and those changes are made, and we bring that information back to the people. We heard you say, this is what we did, this is the result, how do we do? It creates trust. It creates safety. It creates hope for change. It creates buy-in, right? If we're bringing out and rolling out a new change, to come down and just say, this is how the cookie crumbles is harder to land than, hey, the cookie is going to need to crumble. How do we solve this? Right? It's about psychological safety at its premise is about putting people before task. It's about putting connection before correction. I'm going to say that again. Psychological safety at its core is about putting people, their well-being, and their dignity before the job to be done. First, see them as human. And it's about connection, building trust, rapport. I see you as a person before this behavior needs to change. Psychology and neuroscience research says that we actually need 7 positive affirmations for every 1 critical bit of feedback that we get. And I know as leaders, I have made the mistake of spending a lot more time commenting and criticizing and critiquing and correcting and not affirming, appreciating, thanking, acknowledging, seeing, noticing the good and the positive. And that psychological safety, when each of us has a bank account relationally between us, and the currency in that bank account is trust. Trust is not built on monumental policy and great perks. It's built on, hey, Sarah, you were away last week. Are you okay? Hey, I know that your, sister was having a baby. Uh, how did it go? Did you hear any news? Oh, I heard you lost so and so last week. I'm so sorry. That must have been so hard. Seeing the human. Now, we don't have to be therapists. We don't have to be counselors. We do have to see the people. And they want to be seen in their whole lives and to be known and appreciated and valued for their unique contributions to the world. And Gen Z and millennials value that more than ever. And that is why something as simple as whether you agree with it or not, like using a preferred name or pronoun, becomes such a demonstrated act of respect. We don't have to agree, but I can demonstrate respect. And it's so fascinating to me how those are the little things that add to the deposits, I noticed, I appreciated that work. Something as simple as an appreciation, for example. So often we're like, hey, Joe, good job on that. Nicely done. Except that Joe has no idea what he should repeat in order to get that good job again. Rather, in a psychologically safe place, we would actually take the time as leaders to say, hey, Joe, I noticed that you took the time to clean out that machine before reloading the next batch. That was absolutely fantastic. That is such a call to excellence. Amazing. Thank you. Joe knows exactly what to repeat next time. That same clarity is also value when we're giving feedback. Hey, Joe, I noticed you cleaned out the machine. Is there anything that you think you might have missed? Right? I see the oil can is still here. What do you think we should do with that? This didn't work. This needs to be done differently. The next time you clean this, please put the oil can here versus here. I'm making things up now. Specificity, being specific in both our praise consistently and in our feedback consistently, keeps it about the behavior and allows them to have that clarity to know how to behave moving forward. And Brene Brown, one of my absolute favorite workplace culture experts, says this. She says, clear is kind and unclear is unkind. Clear is kind and unclear is unkind. We are being kind when we speak clearly, with clear candor, with plain language, even if it's hard. That is kindness. We Canadians can be a little nice sometimes, and nice is not kind. And psychological safety creates an environment where clear is kind, unclear is unkind. It creates a space where we're not telling people what they want to hear. We're telling them all their good, and we're helping to unpack their opportunities and their areas for growth in a place that's safe and rather than in a place that's condemning. And this is a journey. Like, in all fairness, most of us didn't get this. Who recognizes that? Like, this is all nice and fine and well that you want me to create this for my people. Where was that for me? Anybody? Or am I the only one? Right? I didn't experience that in every workplace. Some workplaces I did. But it's one of those things where it really challenges us now to be the learner as leaders. Mutual mentoring. One of the greatest values of mentors is the ability to see ahead what others cannot see and to help them navigate a course to their destination. And that's John C. Maxwell. He's one of my favorite leadership guys. And the truth of the matter is we need all perspectives in all ages to be able to get that insight. Our young people are brilliant at efficiency and seeing different ways to do things. And they need the wisdom and experience of things we've tried before and compliance, legal, confidentiality, things that we've been burned by already once or twice. They need that wisdom to come in along with their innovation to find the best path forward. When we come together and pair across generations intentionally, we're not only building relationships, but we're spreading knowledge across the organization. So thinking back to our current state, when I talked about 25% of our workforce retiring in the next 8 to 10 years, this mutual mentoring is critical in the next 8 to 10 years, because there is a wealth of information that those retiring folks have that our workplaces need to keep. I just had a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and her husband is an expert mold maker and has been doing it for 40 years, is expert in his class, is brilliant at what he does. And the foundry that he was working at closed down, and he ended up getting a job, actually almost 2 hours away, at another organization. And he is closing in on retirement. And he said to them in his hiring interview, in his orientation, I would really love it if you would find someone for me to mentor over the next few years, because I am not going to be here forever. I am planning to retire before 65. He said it. He said it again. He said it again. He kept making the money. He said it again. They kept making money. They're like, you're just brilliant. He's like, no, like, I need somebody to pour this information into. And they're like, yeah, like 3 months before you leave, we'll get somebody. He's like, no, this will take me 4 years to teach. They did nothing. He announced that he was going to be retiring December 2025. Well, suddenly the panic set in. And now they're having to spend money on a location in his hometown, a pay increase, and all of these extra perks so that he will say yes to another year for him to try and pass on what he knows. I can guarantee you there are brilliant people in our organizations who have lots of things to offer that we have yet to harvest. And mutual mentoring might be a tool to help us do that. Another tool for mutual mentoring is structured storytelling opportunities. Encourage lesson learn circles. So, you can call them whatever you like. I mean, that's just an example. A debrief is another great word. You bring the experts and you bring the newbies and everybody in between together after a project, after a job, after whatever. What worked? What didn't work? What did you learn? What have you known from experience? And just have a conversation about the shared learnings of it. Everyone's going to go home with something brilliant that day, no matter their level of experience. The other thing is, and one organization I've worked with, they are actually encouraging their team that is retiring to tell their stories on video and create story banks of their expertise on A, B, or C, and they're putting it by topical in a digital library for people to then go back in and refer to at a future notice. I mean, there's lots of ways that we can do this. Last but not least in the mutual mentoring is really celebrating the collaborative wins. Recognizing projects where cross-generational pairs achieve success together, highlighting the strengths of each generation in the success of that project, celebrating that diversity, spreading the credit around. That goes a long way for empowerment, and it becomes really, really valuable, especially for our younger generations, to be included in those kudos. Last but not least, how we doing? We're closing in on the last minute, so I hope you got your questions ready. So make sure you throw them in the chat. Would love to open up some time for some Q&A. Our last but not least is our conflict resolution. The aim of an argument and of discussion should not be victory, but progress. Conflict is not something to be avoided. In fact, Conflict is healthy when psychological safety and when emotional intelligence skills are there, because it actually brings the best out of all of us. And conflict doesn't have to be, fisticuffs and yelling and swearing. Conflict is just straight up. We see things differently and we got to grapple with that. But if we can reframe disagreement as a sign of engagement rather than a sign of disrespect, it will help us to normalize healthy disagreement in a positive way. We can normalize or create norms within our teams that say, okay, I want some challenging ideas. We're going to challenge ideas, not people. What are your challenging ideas? What ideas do you have on the table? What are we missing? What should we be doing differently? How could we do it? Let's rip this apart. Let's rebuild it again. Okay? Creating space for those conversations where you intentionally solicit those objectionable and those disagreeing, commentaries becomes very, very powerful. In conflict resolution, we want to practice reflective listening. Stephen Covey says we first want to seek to understand, then we seek to be understood. Right? How do we make it about, can I ensure that I've heard your perspective clearly and that I can actually say your perspective back to you in a way that yes, you got it. Right? And phrases like, what I'm hearing is, or what I think you're saying is, da 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 da. Am I right? And then they can bring clarity to it. Brene Brown goes one step deeper in these conflict conversations. She says, oftentimes, because of our own lived experience, our history, our biases, our things that we've got bring to the table, something will happen and we will begin to make a story up about that. This person is late for work. Well, they just don't care and this and that and oh my goodness, and they can't keep it needed in. We have a whole big story that we create about what that situation. We don't actually fact check it, by the way, most of the time, but we do have a big story. Brene Brown actually would go so far as to say, can we offer, okay, this situation happened. I really noticed I started to feel this and this and this. And the story I'm making up about this is that you really hate coming to work and you think that this job sucks. Wait, what? No, I don't think about that at all. I had a flat tire. Or whatever their situation might be. Now it opens a conversation. But could we actually fess up? And this is daring. I'm telling you, it's daring. Could I fess up to the story I'm making up about myself and put it on the table and say, I recognize it's a story I'm making up about it. And how do we talk it through? Learning to listen, to hear, rather than listening to respond, are skills that all of us are working on, no matter the generation. These listening skills, this attentive listening, every generation needs work on this, no matter who we are. Third tool for conflict resolution, can we use it as a learning tool? So after resolution, we've got it all sorted through. Can we keep that dialogue going? Encourage reflection and discussion. What did we learn about how we communicate under stress? How do we prevent this dynamic from happening again? What are things that you need in order to be successful for your job? This is what I need to be successful in my job. Can we work on these things so that we don't get to this place of tension again or in the same way? And we can turn conflict into insight, which builds our team resilience, maturity, and ultimately emotional intelligence skills. The fact of the matter is none of us are good at this. Well, there are some who are really good at it, and for that we thank you. Most of us are not super great at this. We have those insecure moments. We have those fearful moments. We have those time pressures. We have a boss breathing down our neck, and so then we kind of pass on that tension to others. The world is complex. People come in and they jump to conclusions. They're insecure. They're, welcome to humans. We've got a lot of them in our workplaces. It's weird. And I mean, AI is trying really hard to replace us by robots, but the truth of the matter is this conflict resolution, this learning to get along, there's not a chance AI can take that from us. This is the human work of the future. And leaders who lean in and embrace these skills are leaders who are going to have companies that thrive and flourish and are on the cutting edge of what they do moving forward. Because not only are they going to be attractive to work at, they're going to be great places to work, and they're going to leverage the one thing AI can't take, which is human connection and collaboration and empowerment. And so we have four, I mean, there are more tools for sure, but four key tools that will help us navigate generational dynamics. I would love to hear from you. Which one of these tools, if implemented on a consistent basis, would make the most impact on your team? Is there one that stood out to you, one that caught your attention, one that you're like, ooh, yeah, I could lean into that? And then we're gonna jump in and start leaning into some questions, and I see them starting to come into the chat now. This is so good. I'm gonna move into a Q&A. I would love to hear your feedback there. Psychological safety and conflict resolution stood out. Coaching or mutual mentoring, love it. Fantastic. We've covered almost all the bases now. So somebody's going home with stuff. That is fantastic. There's a question here. When tension arises between age groups, how can we redirect it into learning rather than blame? Who, give me a thumbs up if this is something that you navigate in your workplace? Something that you are challenged with. Yeah, for sure. Love that. So my challenge in this always is that we, the leaders, go first. So if we are having a tension, and whether it's, wherever we are in our dynamic, if we can acknowledge our part in the complexity, and I'm making the assumption that the conflict is between two people at this point. If we can, hey, this thing did not go well. I recognize the story I made up was, or I recognize I didn't eat my lunch and I was really, really cranky and I therefore was snippy. I realize I was insensitive to, like, whatever it is, own your stuff. Go first as the leader. Modeling growth mindset, right? Creating psychological safety. This is my part in this. What part do you see that you played, and how do you and I solve this? Part of the challenge is that we have to make sure that this we're trying to solve is not the person, but it's the behavior of the situation, right? So ideas, not people, right? If we want to navigate and redirect it from blame, we have to take responsibility, and we have to create opportunity for them to do the same. And we have to make it about the behaviors, and we have to make it about the ideas or the concepts, not about the people. Right? And that takes practice, and that, psychological safety is only as safe as our weakest link. A lot of people think that it's a leader's job to create a safe place for me, and then they think that they can just go and be rude and just speak however they want to speak because it's psychologically safe, and just crap all over their leader. That is not a psychologically safe environment, because the weak link doesn't honor psychological safety. Psychological safety is something we all in a workplace have to commit to, in recognizing that we humans are working together, and that you are only as safe as I'm willing to let you be, and vice versa. We have a responsibility in creating safety to each other, right? I can bring my own safety, yes. And we need to create space where that safety is honored and respected as a value, and then define how that behaves. I'm a very big fan of taking our values and putting behaviors associated with them. You know, values, we love psychological safety. Great. If we don't know how that actually shapes our everyday behavior, it will do nothing and it'll just be a pretty decoration on a wall. So tension arises. We need to go first. We need to take responsibility. We need to engage in that listening and that hearing and those coaching skills. And we have to be really, really conscious of our language and, you know, notice when blame is happening. And when blame is coming at us, we can see that too, because sometimes that happens. Well, if you had it, okay, yep, you're right. I did miss this. And these are the parameters that we have to work with. So this is where I need your input and support in this. This is mine to own. What is yours to own? And can we come to an agreement about what we're going to do moving forward? I'm a huge fan of stewardship agreements. Stephen M.R. Covey in his book, Trust and Inspire, does a really good job of laying out a framework for that. I also teach that as well as a strategy, learning conflict resolution and conversation skills, developing that in your people, creating coaching skills, all of those things. So training people how to have these conversations matters. My question is how we can have an effective approach with old generation to share their skills and teach to a new generation what they have learned. Sometimes it seems they feel insecure or offensive if they share what took them 30 years to pass on, or to pass it easily to the new generations within a few months or a year. So first, can we just honor the fact that that is a valid feeling? They have worked really, really hard to be the expert they are. And some feel that those that you are asking them to pass this on to aren't worthy of that effort. Now, that may or may not be true, but that's an honest and understandable feeling. Another feeling that often impacts our older generations is, if I pass this information on, am I still needed? And often older generations struggle to pass that information on because they feel they're being replaced. They feel that they're being moved on from, relegated, made to be extinct. And so as we are approaching this transfer of knowledge, that's why mutual mentoring works so well, because not only are they sharing their expertise, but they're gaining more expertise to make them valuable in new ways. And it's really, really important that we honor the feelings of our elders and our older generations who have, in some cases, taken a lot of damage to get the knowledge and the wisdom that they have. And to be able to honor that. And instead of telling them, this is what I want you to do, how do we get people in the room and say, we have so much brilliance here. How do we help each other? What are some ways? And you co-develop a strategy that everyone contributes to and everyone feels they can be a part of to move forward. Does it take time? Yeah, it does. But all relationship takes time. And we short circuit ourselves and our profitability every time we don't take the time to build connection and to build trust. I don't have time to get into it now, but there's a lot of, impact on trust and the ability to pass on knowledge. So if you're struggling, focus on some trust building. How can leaders set clear expectations without coming across as controlling or micromanaging, especially when younger team members value flexibility? Yes. And this is real. You're 100% right. Younger generations value autonomy, flexibility. And wherever you can give that to them, you should. Because there are going to be areas where you can't give that to them that you will now have to negotiate. Right? But here's the thing. Again, instead of coming from the top down, this is how it has to be. How do we bring them into a conversation and go, we, This is our vision. This is our mission. This is our goals. This is who we are. This is how we serve our customers. This is the why behind the work that we do. In order for us to do that effectively, the best solutions we've found out right now are shift work, or are that we have to have people in the office to be able to do this and do this. We recognize that life is complicated. How do we solve this? They've got ideas. Some are workable, some are not. Being able to say, oh, that could work, and leaning into that helps them feel seen, heard, their ideas are used. You close the feedback loop. I heard you say this, I was able to do that. Some do not work. I love that you would just love to not show up at work today, and also not okay. But telling them you can't just not show up to work doesn't help them. Why? Who did it impact? How do we help bring that understanding, empathy together so that they understand the impact that each other's having? I mean, they probably experienced what it's like when somebody else doesn't show up to work. How do we come together and co-develop a strategy that everyone can agree to? And then can we put that down in writing so that we actually agree to those terms? And in the workshops that I'll be doing when I come up to see all of the fine folks, we're going to lean into some of these skills. And one of the things that I have is my clear agreement, my stewardship agreement. And we just unpack, do we agree on the responsibility? Because the shift that has happened is that accountability used to be me telling you how it is and you complying. In a trust and inspire workplace, accountability looks like, how do you want to show up at the job? This is what the job needs. How are you showing up to that? What are your goals? How are you going to develop? And how do I support you in holding yourself accountable to that? And it's a shift in thinking for those of us who weren't brought up that way. And it's hard, and it feels, what's the word? It feels like inflexible and unsure because we're taking out that control factor. But command and control isn't working anymore. And unfortunately, if we don't meet our younger generations where they're at and find ways to work and find solutions that help them thrive and help us thrive so that we're all getting what needs to be done and figuring out those solutions together, we are going to be frustrated and alone without employees. So as much as we older, and I include myself in this, as much as I wish our younger generations just understood how work and understood the expectations and agreed to play along, that's just not where they're at in some cases. So we have a choice. We can fight and argue. We can fire them, get rid of them, and then hire the next person who probably does the same way and different. And we can have a high turnover that eventually kills our business and put so much stress on our leaders and on us and on our older staff who are willing to put in the extra hours to compensate, that it ultimately kills our organization. Or we can meet people where they're at, listen and hear to what they care about, what they need, what inspires them, and take steps to incorporate as much of that into the world of life that we can create at work for them in exchange for what we need from them. And it's easy to say and friggin' hard to do when there's budgets and there's deadlines and there's to-dos and all of that. And I dare us to say it's still worth the work. Any other questions or any other thoughts, comments, insights, aha moments? Now's my time to get smarter. What have you heard? What connections have you made as you have been taking your lived experience, melding it with this information? What are you putting together? What insights are standing out for you? And would you share that with us in the chat, or you can turn on your camera and your mic if you would like. We'd love to have that dialogue. I would love to hear what's connecting for you, what's making sense, what new ideas maybe have come to your mind that would be valuable. Because I'll bet you everybody here would love to hear your ideas and thoughts or questions. I'll just invite Sylvia to come back and support on the conversation there with the questions. Everybody's deep in thought. I love it. In the chat, was this useful? What was the most useful piece? What do you want to hear more about? Because that would be valuable for Sylvia as well in the training and the resources that she's creating, her and her team. If we are doing the work to meet young people where they are and incorporating the shift, it feels almost very one-sided. Is there a way to convey the expectations to younger people that they have their end to hold up as well? Yes, and that comes after trust. And that's what makes us nuts about it. Yeah, they have to trust that we're there for them, and then we also say, and this is what I need. Like, I think it's a fulsome conversation. We need to have trust. They need to believe that we're there for them, not just to use them for our work. Okay? But that's where a stewardship agreement is valuable, because we are laying out the terms of the work and giving them an opportunity to say, this is hard for me, this works, I need support here, da da da. And you're going to go, okay, yep, I can help with this, I can't help with that, we'll have to get you support elsewhere here, and this is what I need. And we have to come to an agreement on that. You're absolutely right, it's the tension. We can't just give. Accountability means we are agreeing this is the work that's ahead of us, and this is how you and I together are going to get it done. My role is support, guidance, leadership. Your role is execution, ABC, and we're clear about what that is, and then we deliver on it. Was that helpful, Virginia? It's a nuanced conversation, and it's probably rooted in a real situation that you're navigating right now, which is hard to speak to in general terms, if that's fair. Are there other ways to help older leaders learn to transition their way of thinking to have better communication? Oh, yes, this is real. And thank you, Virginia. This is real, right? Because older generations were taught that their age and their expertise finally got them to that sage space. And now we're switching the rules on them. And it's not fair. And I have found that's why coaching skills is so valuable. One of the clients that I work with, it was a tool and die company. They had expert tool and die makers that were brought in to train the apprentices. And the apprentices would go through the training program and would promptly leave. They couldn't retain any of them. And consistently the feedback was, I can't work with so-and-so. He's mean, he's hard, he's difficult, he's whatever. And so they brought me in. I worked with the young leaders and I worked with the older leaders separately, but on similar topics. We talked with the youngers about how work works and different perspectives that older generations have, and what respect looks like for older generations, and how to respond instead of react. And with our older generation, we taught them about learning styles. We taught them about coaching skills. We talked to them about psychological safety. And we empowered them to offer questions, inquire, rather than tell. And we inquired them to encourage them and taught them those listening skills and empathy and vulnerability. So older generations, vulnerability was a no. It was not safe. So you have to create, as a leader, safety for them to grapple with feeling vulnerable and feeling unsafe in sharing their difficulty. But as you continue to massage that communication goes, it is doable. When my 2.5 years at that organization was complete, the manufacturing manager said to me, he says, "You can't even believe the difference on the shop floor." The tradesman who originally was the one who was most repellent was now the favorite of the mentors, and the apprentices were getting upset when they got moved out of his department. And it created an interesting dynamic that was completely opposite. And so it's doable. Sometimes having third parties come in to do that training and that coaching and that partnering and coaching alongside is valuable, because you have a history wall, you have all this lived experience with them, you've got your own job to do. So sometimes having a third party that comes along in as a partner to your organization is also valuable. Hopefully that's helpful as well. Thumbs up. Was this useful? A good spent of your 2 hours? Wonderful. It's been my honor to serve you. Thank you so much for being a part of today. Thank you to Sylvia and your team for facilitating and investing in this kind of training. And I'm going to turn it back to you.
Definitely muted. So, as we bring this workshop to a close, if there's any other questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'll pass along Nicki's contact information in a follow-up email. So if anyone has any further questions or insights, they can contact Nicki. So.
And if you go to my website, Straza Solutions, helps if there we go, .com. I do have an offer for a free book called From Conflict to Collaboration that digs into a bunch of this. And so you can get your free copy when you sign up to my mailing list. So you can do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicki. Just a quick, go back a slide here. Again, Nicki talked about coming up to Sault Ste. Marie on Tuesday, November 4th. So we are offering 2 in-person workshops. One is for emerging leaders and one is for leaders. So the Flourishing Workforce for All Generation is a leadership workshop, again, focusing on practical tools for those tough conversations. We'll also dive into co-development and mutual mentoring strategies, so you can tap into the strengths of every generation on your team, modeling openness, curiosity, and collaboration. That's running from 9 a.m. to 11:30. And then the afternoon session is more for emerging professionals, so building those skills to thrive at work. So you'll learn how to ask clarifying questions, understanding generational expectations again, and then strengthening professional relationships. So again, space is limited, so register early. You can find all the information about each workshop on our website, and also sign up, www.awic.ca, so awic.ca. It's under the events and news section as well. So yes, thank you all for joining us. We're ending 3 minutes early, so everyone gets that time back. So again, thank you for joining us and participating in this afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone.